Hello and welcome back to the Xamarin Forms tutorial where we work on a time tracker app. I'm Patrick and this is the Let's Create series. Alright, but here we go. So our next objective is to do our Java mapping. So we have our base repository. So I'm going to open base repository in Android. Yours should be open. Mine had to quit. And then I'm also going to open the base repository in iOS because they're going to be pretty similar, minus their specific calls to Firebase. And we'll start on the get method. So the get method definitely is going to look very similar to this, except Android is going to need a couple extra classes, and those are going to be like completion listeners. So we'll get to that. But first, let's go into our get method. Let's remove this throw. So we'll say var TCS, because we need that task completion source, equals new task completion source. And this will be of type T, not bool. And then we'll just return tcs.task, and that gives the shared project something to await. And now we can make our call to Firebase. So we can say firebase.firestore. I think we have to go through Firebase Firestore. I think we can just use instance. Yeah. All right, so from here, so we're going to use Firebase Firestore. Let's get rid of these so we can import the namespace, and then we don't have to keep typing that because we're going to be typing that kind of a lot. So you can import using firebase.firestore. And so now we have firebase firestore.instance. And then from here, we can get our collection. And we need the collection name, which comes from the child, right? So it'll be document path, which we don't have yet. So we need to make that. And so we need, let's go up, and we'll make that abstract string. So we can just do protected abstract string, and this will be document path, and this just needs a get, really. And so now any child of this will need to declare a document path, just like we did on iOS. So if we go back to the iOS base repository somewhere, yep, just same thing. This one's public. We can just keep it protected for now. So now in the Android project, we have collection, document path, and then from here we can do document, and this can be, so not user ID. Let's get the document of the document ID that gets passed in. All right, so we can say .get. And just for, if you guys are curious, so we have this, I'm going to bring this over. We have the Firebase docs. And so this lets us take a look at how they do it natively. And all we're doing is converting it to C#, really. So if we go to read data, we can go to Java for Android, and we'll see that it does this collections.get, that's to get a whole collection. We're just getting a single document. Anyway, .get, and then what we need to do is add a onComplete listener. So that'll be that extra class that we need to make. So I'll put this down here. So anyway, so we have .get, and then we need to add this onComplete listener. Now we don't have an onComplete listener yet, so we need to make one. And this onComplete listener is going to extend from this onComplete listener, or it's going to implement it. So under service listeners, under the Android project, let's right click, add new class. And this class is also going to be onComplete listener, but it can't be named the same. So let's call this one a document on document complete listener, because we also have like collection, which would be like the get all. And then we have like save and delete. So this one is just to read a single document. So we'll say on document complete listener. And pretty much the same thing. This one needs to extend from a java.lang. Import the using. Guess it's going to take a minute to realize that there's an error. Anyway, it's going to be, oh, there it is. Java.lang.object, okay? And then it also needs on complete listener. And this one comes from android.gms.tasks, that's right. And then it needs to implement the interface, which has the onComplete. So that's all good. So now that we have this, we want a task completion source to be passed to us. So let's put this in the constructor. It'll be a task completion source. And it'll be of type T, which doesn't really exist yet. So let's go ahead and add that up here onto the onDocument complete listener. So we'll put a T here in as a typed parameter. So we have this task completion source. We need to import the using for system.threading.tasks. And then we can just call this TCS is fine. Now we get this this issue because it's ambiguous, right? It's ambiguous between system threadings task and this GMS tasks.task. And so what we'll do is we will say using task equals android.gms.tasks.task. And the reason for that is because all of the reference to task we're going to do in here is most likely going to be for that Android one. Anyway, we need to cache this locally, right? So we passed in this TCS. We need to cache it. So I'll use an underscore, and I'll say underscore TCS equals TCS, and that'll save it locally. We have an error because that property or data member doesn't exist, so we'll quick fix, and it'll generate the field. So that's perfect. So we have that, and then we can check this on complete. First thing we'll want to do is make sure that task is successful. So we'll say if task.is successful. And so this is where we will, I'm not going to use a comment, but this is where we're going to return that document from the get, right? And so what we'll do is we'll say var, we can just call it doc object is fine. And that will equal task.result. And so now that we have a reference to that object, we can make sure it is a document reference. So we can say if docobj, which if we look, is just a Java Lang object. So we need to make sure it is a document reference. So we can say if it is a document reference, and then we can use a quick fix for Firestore. And then we can call this one docref, which should be fine. So if it is this, then this is where that extension method comes into play, and I don't think we have that yet. It doesn't look like it. So we're going to say TCS.trySetResult, and this will be docref.parse, and we'll parse or convert. Let's do convert because that's like the naming convention we've been using, and it'll return our it'll convert it into a type T. So we don't have that method yet. We'll create it. So that error is going to stay there for a moment. And then we can just return. Otherwise, so none of that is true. So if it's not a document reference, we can't really parse it. And so we will just try to set the result to like the default T, right? So just default. And then we can return from here as well. Otherwise, so if task is not successful, then we can use our little comment, something went wrong. And then we can set the result again, just, not exception, we will set result. And this will be default as well. So since this is the case, we don't actually need both of these, we only need one. So let's delete these, right? So in the task.isSuccessful, let's just delete that because otherwise, this will return. Otherwise, it'll just keep going and it'll make it to here anyway. So there's no reason to have two. So now we need to make this convert extension. But first, before we do that, let's head back to our base repository and let's add our completion listener here. So we'll say new, and this will be our on document complete listener. And it takes in that TCS that we created. And then we'll need a quick fix to bring in the namespace, and that should be good there. Needs a type parameter. Yep, and that's fine. So we'll just bring in this typed parameter here. We'll just put it there. Right, so new on document complete listener with the typed parameter and then the TCS. So that is good. So errors are gone here. And so now we need to make that convert method. So let's do that. So we'll go into the base of the root of the Android project, and we're going to add a new folder. And I'm going to call this one extensions. And then just like the iOS one where we had, what do we call it, document snapshot extensions, we need a document, and this one could be reference, right? So add new class document reference extensions. So document reference extensions. Okay, so we have public class document reference extensions. This needs to be a static class, right? Because it's extensions. And then we can get rid of the constructor. So let's make our first one, which just returns a T. So this will be public static, and it'll just return a T, which isn't declared yet, but it will be here in a moment. And then this will be called convert, and then this is where we declare it, right? So convert T. This will take in a document reference, and we need to use a quick fix to import the using for firebase.firestore. And we can just call this doc is fine, it doesn't matter. And now we need to do the mapping, right? So this one might work well with Newtonsoft. We're going to try it. If it doesn't, then it'll be the same thing as Sunday. You know, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, then I'll do some attempts on my own, and then I'll come back and not waste your time. But for now, let's do this. So we'll say try. We're going to put this in a try catch because Newtonsoft will throw exceptions if it can't parse. So we can catch that exception actually. So try catch, and this one will be we'll just catch all exceptions is fine for now. Probably should be a JSON, I think it's called a JSON parse exception, but so this will be an exception, and then we'll just log this for now. So system.diagnostics.debug.writeLine, and it doesn't matter. We're going to put a breakpoint here, I think. So exception thrown is fine. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. Because I'm going to put a breakpoint here. If we get an exception, I want to know what it is, right? So system.diagnostics.debug.writeLine, and then exception thrown. Doesn't matter what you put there. Most people put something like the e.message, but I want to see it when it happens. So I'm going to put a breakpoint there. So we're going to do that conversion thing just like we did on iOS. So it'll be that we're going to get that JSON string, and that'll be from Newtonsoft, which we need to add. So let's add it. Sorry, I thought we had it. That was in the iOS project. So before we continue here, let's return nil, or let's return default so that error goes away. So at the bottom of this convert method, I just returned a default. We're going to delete that. But I want to add that package for Newtonsoft. So I'm going to right click packages. On Mac, it's manage NuGet packages. And then Newtonsoft's most of the time, it's right at the top. Yep, newtonsoft.json. We're going to add that package. Okay, looks like that added. And so from here, we can parse that string now. So once yours is done, you can say var JSON string or whatever equals newtonsoft.json, JSON convert, and then we're going to serialize this document. Not the whole document. So it's data. You know what? Let me go back to this. I wonder if docref has a document. One second. Let me take a look at the documentation. Okay, I think we don't want to do a document reference. I think we want to do a document snapshot. So we're going to keep everything else the same. In our onDocument complete listener, let's change that reference to a snapshot. So document snapshot, which means we would want to change this name, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But for the time being, so in our extension in Android, let's change document reference to a document snapshot. And now we should have access to document.data. Perfect. And so document data is an iDictionary of string for the key and Java lang object for the value type. And then what we want to do from here is convert that. So we're going to say var item equals newtonsoft.json, JSON convert, and we're going to deserialize that object, and that'll be of type T, and that'll be the JSON string. Next, we're going to want to set that item's ID. Yep, so there's something I missed here, actually. So we need to tell this method that T is an identifiable. That's why we didn't have access to ID, actually. So like if you try ID, it doesn't work. And so what we'll do is at the end of this method declaration, we're going to say where T extends identifiable. And then you should use a quick fix to import that namespace, and you should be good. So deserialize object into our JSON, so that'll bring it the item. Now we know it has an ID because the interface requires it, and so we can say item.id, and so now it's there, and that'll equal this doc.id, and that's perfect. Doc.id is a string, item ID is a string, but it's read only. Yeah. So let's go to this identifiable, and let's change that from a get only to a get set. So you have to be able to set it. So that shouldn't break anything anywhere, but it is required. So that identifiable happened to be in the same file as iRepository. I normally don't like doing that, but that's how it is right now. We'll clean that up. But that allows us to set this ID, and then we can just return this item. And so otherwise, we'll catch this exception, and then I guess we can keep return default. Doesn't matter. So we'll keep return default. So that should work on converting one single item. So that's perfect. So the onDocument complete listener, we have this convert, but the namespace isn't there. So let's quick fix, and we should be able to bring in that extensions that we did. And now we have an issue where it must be an identifiable, but we didn't put that restriction here, so we need to. So at the top on document complete listener, we're going to maybe drop a line for neatness, and we're going to say where T implements identifiable. And then you can use a quick fix and bring in services, and then that should fix all of that. So now convert is good. It's happy with T because it's an identifiable. And so try set results. So this all works, or it seems to work. Last thing we need to do is use it, right? So we have the base repository, but we don't have this test data repository. So let's make that. I think that's a good stopping point for today's video. If you like the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments section. Thank you for watching the Xamarin Forms tutorial. I'm Patrick, and this is the Let's Create series.